We just released new functionality to really optimize the way you can work with files inside UbiOps. And I'm going to show you today how to actually work with it and also how to migrate from the old blob system that we had so far to the new file system to make sure that you can make use of this new functionality. So let's start at the beginning. Normally, or before this release, we worked with blobs inside UbiOps. So you just had a blob that you could pass as input or output, and that was the way of working with file input, so like images, data sets, those kind of things. But we got your feedback that it wasn't super user-friendly because it was never actually meant to really properly be used as a file storage. So we changed that now and really implemented a proper file storage system, which you can find also now inside the web app. So as you can see in the sidebar right now, there's an extra page called storage. And if we go there, we can see a bunch of different buckets. We decided to use the same concept as you would find in other cloud providers. So we use storage buckets. So same as when you're working with S3 or Google Cloud Storage, for instance. And this allows you to basically categorize your files and to maintain them separately and to make sure that you can change the permissions for these files as well. Every project will come with a default bucket by default. This is a bucket where everything will be written to unless you specify otherwise, and every person in your project will have access to this bucket by default. So this also means that any code you had used previously for blobs, you don't need to change anything because it will just all end up in your default bucket. So let me show you an example deployment that actually works with file input and how it looks. So I've got a deployment here called file dummy. It takes a file as input, a text file, and it writes a little bit of text to that text file and returns that file. So let me show you. I'm going to input this file, which is a test.txt. Let me show you how it looks. It's just an empty text file, nothing in it. So if I now go back to my deployment, to the file dummy, and I create a request to it, I can select that existing file because I had already uploaded it to my bucket. Here you can see that you can browse through all the buckets that you have. So let's go to the default bucket and select our test.txt, which I just showed you. So if I select this one and create the request, now what will happen is the code will just read in this test.txt file and write something away with it just to show you how it works. So you can see now also like where our resulting file has been written to. So it's been written to our default bucket and inside these folders, and it's also called test.txt again. So let's go there quickly. Okay, so if I go there now, I can see the test.txt file that was just created by my deployment. So let's download it and look at how it looks or how the contents look. And now you can see that there's some text written to it. And this was done by my deployment. So I'll quickly show you the deployment code as well. So this is the deployment.py of that deployment. I uploaded. As you can see, it works exactly the same as you've been working with blob so far. So I retrieved the file path to this file that I passed as input from my data dictionary, just the same as with files. And in the return statement, I return the path to this new file that I want to output. That's all. There's one minor change that you can make use of in your code, so you don't need to, but if you want to write your output file to a specific bucket, that's also possible. In that case, you don't just return the file path itself, but you need to return a dictionary of the file and then the file path. And then you can also specify which bucket to use. And then you can pass a bucket. So for instance, I've got another bucket which is called training. So I can also pass that one. Oh, there we go. So if you want to output a file to a specific bucket, this is how you can change your code. But if you just want it to end up in the default bucket, you only need to pass a file path, just like with blobs. Okay, going back to the web app. So this is for working with files inside deployments. Same goes for inside pipelines. So nothing very new there. So let me show you how you can actually manage these files that are stored on UbiOps. So right now on the storage page, you can actually visually browse through all the files that are there. So if I go to the default bucket, I can just see all my files here. I can browse through the folders and find the different files I have. And I can also copy the URL to it that I could use inside code. And I can create new buckets. So if I want something different than my default bucket. When you create a new bucket, you have two options. Either creating a new UbiOps bucket, so that's a bucket that's hosted and managed by us on Google Cloud, or you can connect to an existing cloud bucket of your own. So if you, for instance, already are using Google Cloud Storage, or you're using an S3 bucket for some of your files, you can connect to that existing cloud bucket, just fill in the details here, and then you can use it. But let's say I just pick a UbiOps bucket, then you can give your bucket a name, so bucket example, give it a description, and you can also set an automatic deletion policy. So before with blobs, we had a time to live that you could specify for your blob so that it would get automatically deleted after that time. Right now, we've got that same policy, but on the entire bucket. So you could set it to never, and then we won't automatically delete files, and it's all up to you. But you can also, for instance, specify a policy that every week the entire bucket will be wiped. So that's what you can find here. Then I can create it, and there you see my additional bucket example. And actually, that's all there is to it for working with it inside the web app. Now there's one last thing I want to show you for working with it through code, because if you use the client library a lot, we've made some helper functions to make it easier to work with files. So we've got a utility function for uploading a file and for downloading a file that you can use inside the client library. On this page in the documentation, you can find some examples of working with it. So for instance, here you can see it. Now it's just a single line of code to upload a new file to a specific bucket, and also a single line of code for downloading a file from a specific bucket, which is a lot better than how it was previously in the client library, where you would need several calls to do the same thing. So we hope that that helps you out. And that's working with files, and that's how the new file system works. If you have any questions, there are a lot of tutorials about the new file system on our documentation, so please have a look there, or just let us know if you have any additional questions, and we'll be happy to help you out.